Hey guys, Shay here from Fool on a Journey. I am filming because I just got so excited about a tag I could not film. So if my camera falls off halfway through, we'll just put it back together and figure out how to edit that out because my filming situation is still the worst. So the tag, based on the title, 10 decks for 10 Sephiroth. That word does not flow out of my mouth, like Sephiroth, because I feel like I'm definitely pronouncing it wrong and it's not an English word, and I'm from Alabama, and so pronunciation is already a struggle. We're going for spheres. So if I say spheres, that's what I mean. So the reason I think this whole tag is so cool is because people are trying to describe in like a 2 or 3 minute intro to their video what is the tree of life, which is amusing because, I mean, it's books and books and books and years and years and years of study. And so just like, oh, here's a blurb about what that is amusing to me as someone who's fascinated by the entire study. So I'm in no way saying that anybody got it wrong. They didn't. It's just fascinating what you touch on as an individual. Like, here, these are the key points that I know this, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to do the same. It will be equally amusing if you sort of know more of the complexities, what I chose to point out. But I will say ahead of time, this is my extra credit deck. It is not about any of the decks that I chose for a sphere, but this book is my, I don't want to say the foundation for everything that I know about the Tree of Life, but it's the most current one. Like, I just finished reading this book, and I know that I'm going to reference this book when I want that quick reference now instead of the book that I've been previously quickly referencing. And I think it does a much better job than any of the other books that I have read in explaining what the feeling is supposed to be when it comes to experiencing a sphere or experiencing the path between the spheres. And the experience, the feeling, the emotion, what is happening, I feel like does more for me, like tell me what's happening in a story kind of a way. It sits better in my brain, and I can articulate it better when I'm trying to relate it to tarot cards. So I just want to briefly, before I get started with my 10, say that I highly recommend this. People who sort of just chuck this deck into the realm of it's a good stepping stone between RWS and Thoth, or it's a good starter Thoth, I hard disagree. This really goes so much more into using tarot as a way to connect to whatever your personal concept is of God, and the description that she uses to sort of state whether or not you and she are on the same page about what God is. It is universal, unconditional love. It sort of has a, like the Buddhist tent of the oneness. And I really liked that. And if you're someone who's looking for a spiritual connection to tarot, highly recommend this book. And very quickly, I'll just show you a couple of these cards. Yes, they are very Thoth. They include keywords, but it's really beautiful. And just overall, I think it is an incredible deck if any of those things that I just said interest you, and if you want to learn about the tarot in connection to the Tree of Life. The book is really just, so far, the best that I've read. So let's talk about the Tree of Life. So, spheres. The purpose of the Tree of Life is to connect two ends of a road. So you're not saying that they're two opposite things. You're just looking at the two ends of a road. One is a start and one is a finish. So how are we going to connect them? The starting place is the dark sea of eternity. I'm paraphrasing, but that came from here. The dark sea of eternity. And the end of the road is your physical experience of life. So what you smell, what you touch, what you can pick up, what you write down, like physically, like the physicality, right? So we're going to go from the dark sea of eternity to life and experiencing physical life. And the spheres are sort of like big signposts along the way. They are not in a straight line, so you could go from 1 to 6. You could go from 1 to 3. There's different roads that connect these different really big sort of like cities where certain aspects are emphasized and certain forces or happenings along the way to that physical experience of life are happening. So we've got roads, we've got these big cities. I know I'm going for all kinds of crazy explanations here. So here's your brain. Take your brain with me to the dark sea of eternity. You've got nothing going on, there's nothing around you. Okay, and then sphere 1. Okay, you have the beginning, the source for all existence. And so my sphere 1 deck is the Rider-Waite Tarot, because before there was nothing. And I mean that in like a tarot kind of way. Like, this was my first tarot deck. And the reason that I went for this one in Barnes & Noble's, now this is not the same copy because this cardstock is just infinitely better. This is the original tarot by Geburah, or Debrig, I don't know how to say it either. There was a fairy tale explanation of what the fool's journey was, and it was like, once upon a time, a fool stepped out his door and then like met justice and became to the hangman. And, you know, it was just the whole story. It was a story. And anytime you get me with a good story, I'm on board. Like, once you've told me the story, I love it. And so that was kind of the kickoff point. So for me, it made sense that that would be my sphere 1. Sphere 2 is the Universal Father, the sphere of energy and a mission, a push forward. This is my sphere 2. It is the Hermetic Tarot. The reason that I chose this one is because this is actually one of the very first decks that I bought, but I didn't use it. I mean, like, I would pull it out and I would look at it and think, I don't know what that symbol is. I don't know what the B is about. What is going on here? I don't know. And I'd put it away. And it was sort of this constant motivator. In the very back of it, at the time, was a very small drawer of tarot decks. And it was sort of saying, learn this. Like, you can do this, figure this out. There's more to tarot than just looking at pretty pictures. If you want to know what all this is, you can do that. Go, figure it out. And that was the push for me to study, for me to just go figure it out. And that drive forward to me clearly signified sphere 2. And yes, I am not saying all of the Hebrew names of the spheres. It's kind of a cheat, but I know that I'm pronouncing them wrong, and so that just makes me sad. So just go with it. Okay, we're sticking with spheres and their number. Sphere 3 is the Universal Mother, the sphere of receptivity and nurturing. This was really hard. This is the pocket edition, by the way, if you want to know how I'm holding it like this. It's very tiny. I have the full size, but I just really like this one. I feel like you don't need a whole lot. Like, not that the images aren't detailed, but it's just short and sweet, and I like big spreads, so tiny decks are awesome. So on point, sorry, tag. Universal Mother. While I know that the universal archetype of a mother is nurturing and it's very sweet and it's very soft, comforting place, you cannot remove your concept of mother from your own mother. That's just my personal opinion, or at the very least, I haven't. And while this deck definitely feels like that, and while my own mother definitely felt like that, my mom was pretty tough. She expected work, she expected effort, and she was very happy to tell you aggressively when she was not happy with you. And that, the edge there, like, yeah, I'm gonna be your best friend, I'm going to wipe your tears when you cry, but when you complain about stupid crap, I'm gonna kick you in the butt needed to be in there. And I actually think that this deck does this in a really unique way. So like, yes, this just is this very beautiful Ace of Wands. I don't see a lot of fire in this image, even though there should be. But what gets me is when you're looking at the tougher cards, like that does not look soft. That is a fight. Here's another one. Like that is actual danger being depicted there. And while the method with which the difficult things are being presented may be eased off, the danger is still really there. The edge is still really there. And so I felt like that fit for me. So that is my sphere 3. Sphere 4. Okay, building and creating. This one was a little harder to grab because I could have gone a lot of different ways, but I went with another deck that excited me. And this is actually the second tarot deck I ever purchased. But the reason that I sort of chose this later down the path and it started applying later is because I didn't read the guidebook until much later. Initially, I bought the deck. I was really inspired by the feeling of the like papyrus and this sort of like ancient looking art. Just in general, that style of art inspires me. It gets me excited. I love the feelings. So I just read the RWS meetings that I already knew on these cards because these cards were more fun to look at. Finally, I read the book and realize tarot has a lot more going on. You can do a whole lot more with these archetypes than just what, you know, I had already read in my little standard Rider-Waite Smith deck. And knowing that there was more, that there could be more, that you can go beyond the quote-unquote Golden Dawn standard and see some really cool stuff and let people's creativity expand and sort of merge with yours. And that to me was a very building and creative moment. So I chose the Egyptian Tarot for my Sphere 4. Sphere 5. Chaos, destruction, and breaking down. Now, this is interesting because this breaking down is about being positive, not negative. So it's pointing out something that you built did not go the way that you hoped it would, did not end up the way that you wanted it to end up, and you are pointing at it and saying, this didn't work, this was bad, and I'm going to tear it down and I'm going to rebuild. We're going to do this again. I can do better. And looking at something and saying, this is not what I wanted it to be and I want to do better is shadow work in my mind. And while this is certainly not the only deck that I use for shadow work, it was one of the first decks that I used to experience what is shadow work and what is facing the, you know, my personal shadow and what is the breaking down of where that came from and the rebuilding of who I want to be based on who I am as a reactionary person in the world. And so that really led to this one. There is a cheekiness, and I mean that in sort of a sly, trickstery kind of way. Like the moon has puppets on these people. Like the moon is the puppeteer. Like that's kind of sneaky. It's kind of trickstery in a way that is the sort of baser side of humanity. Sometimes people think about themselves first and do selfish things, and sometimes I'm one of those people, and sometimes you need to look at that and where that came from and why that happened, which is why the deviant moon for me became Sphere 5. So 6, and this one is interesting because the deck really is not going to make sense to other people, I don't think. I mean, they all probably don't to some extent, but this is the Tabula Mundi. When you're talking about Sphere 6, my sort of keywords and the feeling that we're trying to talk about here is the Christ consciousness or higher self-consciousness, being one with source. And again, you know, you got to think her source that she's talking about specifically is trying to reach that universal love. Now, I don't really think that this deck focuses on that, but the reason that this deck was the immediate choice for me is because I've been using the deck for that. I started very, very long time ago, right after I finished book M. I've been going at this now for like 2 years and probably have another 2 to go before I finish the whole process of working through each of these cards. there has not been a time for the past 2 years that I have not had these cards displayed on my altar in what is my sort of spiritual space. And they are about looking at the archetype, looking at the feeling. They are about looking into what is my current level of where I am on the tree and on the, the paths between. Am I very rooted in my physical life right now, or am I reaching for that unconditional love of everything, and sort of that examination. And I've been doing a lot of spiritual work with that. And because this is the deck that I just happen to have started using and just haven't stopped because it's gorgeous, that's the deck that I immediately picked for Sphere 6. When you're talking about, Christ consciousness and higher self, it's, how do you pray? And I really let cards help me identify, what am I asking for? What am I reaching up for? What am I missing that I need help with? And because this deck became a part of that, within my personal practice, and it just hasn't stopped. I've never felt the need to grab a different one. Yeah, so this is definitely Sphere 6, and it's kind of a personal one. But any deck that you use or that you look at and that inspires you to think, I want to be better, I want to do better, or I need help, or I am so grateful for this, all of those feelings of gratitude and asking for help, all that kind of stuff, that all connects me to that 6th sphere. So that is 6. 7. Okay, this one's kind of funny too, and another personal one. And it is a little bit cheeky, but I'm good with it. So Sphere 7 is the sphere of emotion, intuition, and psychic abilities. The Morgan Greer. I love this deck. It is hilarious. The mustaches and the beards, it's just never-ending hilarity. I can't get over it. I love it. It makes me happy. And it's such an easy reader. I don't have to think about what any of these cards mean. I just know. The colors are still very primary. I don't know why I like this deck so much better than the RWS, but I just do. And maybe it's because the people look a little sillier in it and those look a little more serious. But this is the one that I associate with reading cards for other people. And invariably, there's a lot of sort of, show me what you got. What do you mean you read tarot cards? And I don't take that seriously. It doesn't hurt my feelings. But I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay, let's go. And so some of my quote unquote psychic hits have been reading for other people. And since this deck in a 10 is the one that I typically take with me to read with other people, that's where this usually sits. Also, it did just so happen to be this deck that I had one of my sort of first, it felt very, sign from the universe-y kind of a readings that I did for myself that really, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the bells were ringing in my head, like, oh my gosh, the Morgan Greer just told me that. How did I miss it? Crazy sort of moments that felt psychic to me. So this is my 7th sphere. Keep moving. Video's getting long. Okay. Sphere 9. Ooh. Okay. Now, I'm cheating a little bit. Just a little bit. Because a lot of what I'm about to say about this deck is just personal opinion. I have not read the guidebook, but I have it. And I've only very minimally worked with this deck. So I'm kind of cheating. But Sphere 8 is the sphere of intellect, divine reason, or the universal mind. So I have chosen the alchemical tarot. Now, here's why. The concept of alchemy, to me, seems very universal. Whether it is universal in the sense that, everybody thinks alchemy is cool, which, let's be honest, everybody does. Or it's universal in the sense that everybody is really trying to do this, whether they're calling it alchemy or not. That idea of alchemy of self, of bettering yourself, of trying to be a better person, of trying to learn and grow as you exist. All of that, I feel like, is absolutely something that everyone thinks about doing. I'm thinking about, I want to be a better person. Everybody's had that thought at some point. I'm thinking, I want to be able to react better in certain situations. And the way that you learn to do that, that process, whether you acknowledge, what you're calling it as far as what point of the alchemical process and the alchemical keyword, whether you know that word or not, you're still doing it. And so to me, that makes this feel very universal mindy. Can you put an E on the end of universal mindy? I don't know, I just did. So that is my sphere 8, sorry, that was sphere 8. I feel like I may have said 9 the first time too, but that was 8. 9 is what's next. 9 is the sphere of the subconscious mind, the portal through which spiritual ascendance is achieved. So subconscious to me is dreams and wondering and, these sort of images that move you. This is the Russian Black Tarot. The actual name of the deck is Black in the Russian language, which I, of course, cannot pronounce. This deck is just an RWS clone. But the reason that it's so important to me and definitely speaks to my subconscious is because I'm someone who's always loved really dark, creepy stuff. I read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark when I was very young. I started reading Stephen King in like 7th grade and never stopped. And so I love the dark and creepy. I love it. And in wanting to learn tarot, it occurred to me that people used tarot for the quote-unquote dark and creepy, but the RWS was this bright, perky, daytime kind of looking thing, and this was just, it was the perfect way. I could use all the same meanings that I already knew because it was mostly the same picture, and this really opened up to my personal subconscious. I got so much more out of these weird, like he's missing his head, the half bodies that I was looking at, they just made so much more sense to me. And because of that, because of finding a deck that was my vibe, that really helped me read better and then really helped me connect better. And then my connection to tarot is what really inspired my personal spiritual path and wanting to keep going that way and trying to see where that would lead me. So this is my sphere 9. And last one. Okay, the last one that we have here is sphere 10, which is the physical world body. Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, words. The physical world, your body, the entity where your spirit is ensouled. But I'm sorry, I use the word your, and really it should be the spirit, because we are all, according to her, specifically back to this book, her concept is that we are all a part of the one spirit. So we are all one. So I just want to make sure that I didn't, change that for her. But physically, in my body, in how I move from the world, I absolutely feel like this deck, which is the Fool, for me. Like when I think about the concept of just bumbling around, I don't really know what I'm doing. I know that I want to do something. I'm trying new things. I'm the adventurer. It all sort of is encapsulated in this amazing deck. This is the Tarot of the Absurd. And everything about this deck feels like every card is like the tarot card aspected from the Fool. I really consider this whole deck like reading with slightly different versions of the Fool everywhere because it's silly, but all of the symbology is there and I get it. It makes sense and it feels very, very real, even though it looks kind of surreal. And that is just cool. And that feels like what life feels like, in my humble opinion, where you're just trying to work it all out and you don't really know where you're going, but you know you got to go somewhere. And this deck sort of like, that's just, it's weird. Like it's weird, but I get it because they're all the balance and it's all there. Yeah, so Tarot of the Absurd is my sphere 10. And I just want to briefly thank Wendy Wendy's Occult Compass, sorry, that's her whole channel name, I had to remember the whole thing, Rose Honey Ritual, and Garden Goddess Tarot for making this super awesome, very esoterically nerdy tarot tag. It was great. I will tag, or I'll connect to all their videos in my description, and I hope that other people do this. I hope that other people make the attempt, even if you don't know anything about the Tree of Life, give it a go. And it's really interesting to see what people make of it. And that was my response. So as always, thanks for watching.